Leo Disanto is a song and story man hailing from central Pennsylvania, and in addition to his love for music, he's a self-admitted compulsive adventurer. His travels have taken him all over the world, from the heart of the Alaskan Tundra to the monasteries in the Himalayas. They've also included more than a few trips around the United States along the way. In my opinion, Leo's an entertainer and a visionary beyond his years. He captivates music lovers in backyards, front porches, pubs, downtown streets, parking lots, really anywhere that he can find an audience. He's a modern-day minstrel, a new-age troubadour, if you will, an artist who has an incredible way with words. He doesn't just play the songs, he lives them, and he invites you to do the same. So in today's episode of the Solo Musician Podcast, we're going to deep dive with Leo into what just drives him to make him the musician that he is and fill that new modern-day minstrel role as he gallivants all across the world. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Well, I'm not quite all right, but I'll probably be there any minute now, any minute now.
Yeah, I picked up, there's a YouTuber that I watched that's a musician out of New York City, and his name's Frank Persico, and he was talking about this like camera that he uses for his vlogs and for, gig shoots and all that, and it was an Osmo Pocket 3. And
okay.
It's great. It's like on a swivel. It's got, face tracking, and it's got, a million different settings that you can control. And it records.
Are they very expensive?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I'd love to have something for gigs, but my budget is basically non-existent.
Oh, dude, I get it. I was like, it was an investment for me because I was I could never justify buying it because I think they're like, I want to say the camera itself is like $500, and then the accessory pack is like another $150.
Sure.
But it comes with like a lav mic and all kinds of cool stuff for gigs. So
that's cool. I did invest in a DSLR camera used. I bought it from some kid who was going to take up photography, and he got all the stuff, and then it never really took for him. So I got a pretty good deal on everything. And it's a Canon Rebel camera. Oh yeah. So I shoot a lot of my videos at home with that, and it's a really nice picture. It's not very useful for shooting live video because it can only do 25 minutes or something.
Oh yeah.
But
I got you. Yeah, it's all trial and error. I had a
it is.
I had a Rebel T7 for a while, I think it was. And I sold that thing a couple of years ago because I was using that. I had somebody come to my shows for a while just to take pictures, and I would be like, okay, you don't even have to bring a camera. Like, I'm going to give you a camera. I'll give you like a meal and some drinks or something, and you could just take some pictures. And then after a while, I was like, iPhones take better pictures sometimes than some of these cameras.
I know, that's the thing. You could get that kind of set up, and you end up using the iPhone for videos half the time because it's so easy. When I bust out my DSLR camera to make a video, I have to have so many fluorescent stage lights on myself that it's like 100 degrees in my little studio here. With the iPhone, I could just set it up and it adjusts to any light that's in the room and takes nearly as good a picture.
Technology, man. It's wild. It's wild. Right now I'm sitting under a ridiculous, it is bright as hell in this room. Cause I have these huge box lights above me.
Okay.
Cause if I don't, this thing, it's a crapshoot on what kind of video you get out of that with just no lighting. But
do you post the videos for these too, or just the
yeah? So
YouTube channel or something?
Yeah. So I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel, which is the whole reason why I bought the camera. And and so now I'm doing audio and video, and I'm finding that like the audiences don't cross. They don't really intermix.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'll get like, 400 to 500 to 1,000 sometimes downloads of the audio part of the episode. But the video part, it's like, because it's brand new, I'll get like 100 views, 200 views per episode. And it's unique people. It's not the same people that are listening to it. So it's interesting. I'm learning stuff, Why not?
Yeah, there's a lot of competition for attention these days. It's about the most valuable resource that anyone can give to you, and I think that most of the time we give it away way too cheap.
Oh my God,
So,
right? Yeah, absolutely. The second podcast I ever did for this podcast was called Know Your Worth. And I was telling
I like it.
people like you have to charge what you're and understanding where you're at. You know what I mean? Like if you're just
Yeah.
starting out as a musician, you're probably not going to be able to charge as much as somebody that's been doing it for a
No.
long time.
No, nor should you. I mean, there's that whole dues paying thing
You got it.
that has to be done, and everybody goes through it. But you're right, though. There comes a point where people are working too cheap, and it's kind of poisoning the well for everyone, because then people come to think that fair rates are high and shit rates are fair. And
Right.
It's a process of learning, because how many artists struggle in some way with their own conception of their self-worth to begin with, so when it comes time, yeah, right. That's like asking how many artists are there, right? So
Right.
when it comes time to decide what's the dollar amount on that, it's very challenging, it's very uncomfortable, and you have to make some kind of an uneasy peace with it. And it helps. I like what you're doing here with this podcast, because I think people who are kind of uncertain about such things can kind of listen to other musicians, like, hey, what are they doing? What do they think is reasonable? And that's a good resource for people,
Yeah.
I mean, the one that hooked me in when you sent me the link to your show, I was scrolling through and I saw the one that said, here, the episode was like things that suck about being a musician. It's like, all right, dish, brother, dish. Let's hear it. That was the one that got me.
Dude, I love that. That is the one that has cost me the most relationships and friendships. Right? Oh my God. The amount of people that were in my life before that episode and then after is unreal.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And it was, there were people that were like, every gig you play is a blessing, and every single time that you should be grateful. And I'm like, I'm not saying that any of that isn't true. I'm saying that there are some things that are like double booked shows after you drive 4 or 5 hours to get to a gig, and then they're like, sorry, we thought you were tomorrow night. And I'm like, what happened here? Like,
I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's a blessing to get to play music for your job, but it's also fair to say that people still like being treated with dignity and respect at their job, no matter what it is.
Oh,
right?
yeah, man.
So it, I think that it's helpful, again, for musicians, especially people who might be newer to the game or something, to hear what should you be willing to, or, what might you put up with, or what might be normal? What are other people experiencing? Where should you draw the line? I remember not having much of a sense of those things in the early days, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who don't. So,
right.
I think there's a way to discuss that without being, and I don't recall you saying anything that was too personally, negative towards anyone in that episode. Anyway, it was I listened to that one and the one with my good friend Shine. And
Shine, dude.
One of my good pals.
I'll tell you, I got introduced to you and Shine's music right around the same time.
Oh yeah.
So Jessica Batts. Right?
Oh yeah, I know Jess. She's a friend of mine.
Yeah, so she had introduced me to your music, and then I found Shine organically on YouTube on one of those like old VHS tapes, recordings of him doing "Find My Way" by some river in New Orleans, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this music is incredible. I was blown away by his playing and singing and just the content of the songs. And then I had the exact same thing happen like a week later whenever Jess was like, you got to check out Leo and his music.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I like took a listen to your music and I'm like, oh my God, like, where has he been? And you've been around for forever. Like, I was like,
I've been knocking around for longer than it even makes sense to me to contemplate, honestly.
It's so good, but your I have so many questions for you today
good.
that I think are going to be.
I love questions.
Oh man, and they're not. You know, I try not to ask all the normal stuff that you're going to get in interviews because I think that some of those questions are a little generic and they don't really get to who you are. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to know what strings you use. I don't want to like all of that stuff doesn't. It has no bearing on you as an artist. There are more
interesting things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are more interesting things for two artists to talk about. Although, you know, if you wanted to know what kind of strings, I wouldn't view that as being out of line, but it's also probably not that important. You know, it's like everybody's got their thing they like. Well, I'm grateful to Jess for recommending my music like that. That's really kind and generous of her, and it's consistent with the kind of person that I know her to be.
Oh yeah.
And I wanted to tell very briefly my little story about meeting Shine, just because it's funny. I met him on the road actually in I think 2012 outside the Cafe Lena in Saratoga, New York, Saratoga Springs. It was open mic night, and Shine and Nathan were out there, and they were real young at the time, like early 20s, and I was in my maybe early 30s. He's about 10 years younger than me. And I saw these two like raggedy looking, street looking kids hanging out on the porch, and Nathan had an accordion, and I was like, oh, good, a hippie with an accordion at the open mic. This should be interesting. You know, I was a little more of a judgmental kind of a, you know, person back then. It all came from my own insecurities, of course, but I tended to, I had to find ways to judge other people so that I guess I could feel okay about myself. That a lot of us have that problem sometimes. But anyway, I thought that, and then we all went in and played the open mic, and those guys just got up and destroyed the place. Just like Nathan was going back and forth from the piano to the accordion, and just like in mid song, and it was we all became friends right then and there, kind of. And our tours kept intersecting that summer. We ran into each other again in Burlington, Vermont, and then again in Portland, Maine. And I'd hear an accordion on the street, and there they would be busking somewhere. And we've been good buddies ever since then.
Man,
Sean and I just had a great show together back in December, actually, at the
I missed
Cable
it.
House Presents.
It made me so angry.
Series.
I was going to come see you. My girlfriend and I were going to come see you and Shine down there at the marketplace, at the market house, right?
Yeah.
And I saw you were there, and then we had it on the calendar. And then the next day I woke up and I'm like, I think we were supposed to do something last night. What was it? And then I was like, no, dude, I'm not even, that might be the most upset I was in 2024, was understanding that I had missed your show.
I do that all the time too, man. I'm so bad at being, people are always like, have you seen this band or this band? I'm like, I'm the worst fan, man. I always think like, oh, I'm going to go to that show. I'm 100% going to go to that show. And I'm like, oh, that show was last week. You know,
yeah.
It's tough when you're keeping your own schedule together. It really is.
Well, shout out to Nate and Jesse. Are they still playing together? Nate?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
I ran into them last year down in New Orleans, just randomly. I didn't know. Although if you're going to run into those guys anywhere, New Orleans is as likely a place as any. But I was at this like traditional jazz music party at this musician's house down there in New Orleans last winter, and they just walked in, and I was surprised and not surprised, and it was a beginning of a nice little visit with those guys. Two very inspirational characters in my life. Always love running into them.
Just such a wealth of positive energy and just incredible. Like what I love about them is when you're watching them online, their personalities come through so thick.
It's very big.
It's so big and refined.
They're the kind of people that just make they're the kind of people that make other people around them, other musicians, better. There have been a few times where we were working on something together, like a video, practicing for it, and Nathan would just kind of keep being like, all right, everybody do it again. Let's try this. And just kind of really always kind of nudging people to be their best, not out of any compulsion to be the best, but just out of a sense of wanting to make it as good as it can be, you know, which is, I think, the best reason. It's always about music, and it just flows very naturally with those characters. And
that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, all right. I'm going to jump in my first question. You,
please.
I first of all, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I wanted to say that earlier, but now it's coming out. I have been a fan of yours for at least 5 years now. As soon as I found your music, I became a fan. All of your releases, especially, you know, your album last year was absolutely incredible. I know you have a new album coming up,
Thank you.
and we're going to talk
Yeah.
about that towards the end here. So stick
Excellent.
around, everybody.
Well, thanks back at you, because, as I was saying earlier, attention is about the most valuable thing you can give anybody. And so I appreciate you spending some time talking with me, and anybody who's listening, I appreciate you guys too.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I want to know what you believe drives you as the storyteller that you are. Like, what is the thing you think is behind the fact that you have this incredible way with words? Like, you take very mundane conversations and you turn them into something that's like captivating. Like, even any of your social media posts, whenever you kind of post about anything, I'm always like, you are a wordsmith. So your ability to tell stories, where do you think that comes from?
Well, at the earliest level, I come from a family of writers. For one thing, my mom's a published author, and my father was a playwright and a business writing professor, and just very verbal people. So there was always a lot of heavy verbiage flying around the house, both for good and for ill. But I remember when I was a little kid, one time trying to tie some of my hair back in a ponytail. I just thought it'd be cool. I've seen people with ponytails, and my dad comes out and he's all upset about it. He's like, "Is it my understanding that the boy wants to have some sort of a rudimentary or incipient ponytail?" And everybody just broke up laughing, because we're like, he just said something, and you know, we're not quite sure what. But yeah, so there were a lot of people, storytelling, uh, verbosity. We're all very prominent in my house, and that's bound to get under your skin a little bit. But also, stories are just really kind of the way that we understand our being in the world. Even when we don't think of them as stories. Even like, I'm a musician on a podcast talking with another musician about musicianship. That's a story. And
Mm.
you can say it corresponds pretty closely to our sensory data and everything like that, but it's a story nonetheless. And a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves are, they have power to determine how we experience our being in the world. And I just find that really fascinating. It seems to be something that's unique to humans, as far as I know, because of language and what have you. And so it's just really fun to play with it, to play with words. And for me, the best pieces of writing and storytelling kind of give you this sense of possibility that you didn't have before, the sense of
Mm.
what might be possible in life and in the world and in relationship, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And storytelling is such a strong aspect of music, particularly like, folk music.
That's such a great point, man. I mean, I think that the way that you tell stories, that they aren't just this surface kind of explanation of what's going on. It gives it this depth, right? You get this immersive experience where we all know people that they can't tell. They'll tell stories, but they don't go anywhere. They don't have a right. They don't have a point. They're just talking to talk. There's word garbage in there. There's a lot of filler words that mean nothing. So it's like, whenever
Yeah.
you take time to curate each word, and you're curating an experience for somebody. And that's what I always feel whenever I look at anything that you do or I listen to your music. You've hand selected those words. There's no filler. You've hand selected words that meant what you wanted them to mean, until the phrase that came out was something that can put somebody into the place where you wanted them to be. That's what it comes across as to me.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, because I hope, and I guess I believe that I've gotten a bit better at economizing my language over the years. I used to be so verbose in my songwriting and in my writing. I loved like this torrent of colorful words. And some of the writers that I liked at the time, like Jack Kerouac was very influential on me when I was a teenager, and it's just starting to travel and just kind of starting to discover life. And he wrote like that. He would tape reams of paper together so he could just type continuously on his typewriter, and just kind of
Wow.
go and go and go. And it was like bebop jazz, just note after note. Like, if you listen to some of those Charlie Parker
Oh
sax
yeah.
solos or something, and there's just so many notes, but now those notes count. And some of the words that I was using in my earlier days, I think didn't so much. And I noticed after a while that audiences weren't responding to some of the things I was writing the way that I thought that they ought to. And I came to realize that I was saying too much in my songs sometimes, too many words, not leaving enough space for people to take those words in. And so I have worked consciously, very consciously over the years to learn to tighten it up and have economy, which is something I think only in the past year have I started kind of doing any sort of songwriting workshop facilitating. And that has caused me to take an even closer look at, what seems, like the best practices for writing, and just kind of use a tighter, more muscular language that other people can relate to and grab onto.
That makes sense. I mean, you're leaving room for inflection, and that's most of what music is about, right? Is how you connect to it, how you interpret it. And if you're just telling them everything that they're supposed to feel with the song, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I don't relate to that at all.
No, it's true. And I feel like maybe back then I was writing a bit more from an egoic place where, I wanted to have something very interesting to say, and I thought I did. Mm-hmm. And I feel like now my whole trajectory as an artist and an entertainer is gearing more towards, rather than what's in it for me, more like what's in it for us. How can I connect to other people? Because that's kind of what we're all really looking for out of this game, right? When we feel like we're succeeding to some extent, I would say for most people, I might be going out on a limb here, maybe not. Maybe some people are like, no, I just want lots of money or something. But I feel like people who make things want to connect with other people's hearts through those things, and therefore some attention should be paid to, like, how are you doing that? What opportunities are you giving them to come through that door? Join you there.
That's a great point. Do you feel that, I just thought of this question, and I thought it might fit this very well. Do you feel that training jujitsu, do you feel like that's helped to kind of shape your songwriting in a certain way, with being able to release ego and understand, like, you know what I mean? Because there's no ego in jujitsu. I mean, you can have one. Yeah. It's not a good idea.
You can, but it won't be a pleasant journey for you.
Right. Right.
At least not until you get really good. And I don't know if that day's ever coming for me.
I hear that. What belt are you right now?
I've been a blue belt for about 2 years now. So conceivably I could be a purple belt sometime soon, but, I don't really focus very much on promotion. I'm just kind of, I'm in a different boat than a lot of the guys and gals that I train with, because, we have a lot of younger folks who are still very competitive, and they do compete, and, they're taking paid MMA fights and stuff like that. And I kind of view myself as maybe a useful training partner for those people to beat up, so that they can get as good as, like, we got kids that are training 10 times a week, 2 sessions a day, 5 days a week. I'm a musician. I'm a hobbyist. I'm just like, hey man, I'll roll with you. We'll go hard. Don't break my fingers. It's cool. I do it for my own.
If you could see that on camera, that is the result of jujitsu for me.
Would you just like hold a grip too hard or something like that?
No, this was like 3 months in. I tried to brace myself when I was getting tossed, and idiot, stupid move, and I just felt it snap.
It's pretty understandable when you're that new too, that you resist what's happening. And, I mean, it could happen to the best of us. It could happen. There is some risk. And I think it was a reporter from LNP who asked me a couple of years ago when my new album was coming out, aren't you worried about becoming injured doing jujitsu? And I said, I don't like to allow those kinds of fears to detract from my doing things that I get some that are valuable for me in some way. And you kind of touched a little bit on why I think it is. There is this kind of project to transcend the life that lives from that ego self, from that little kind of contracted self. And I do view jujitsu as like an extreme form of yoga in that regard. It's like, because the yoga is all about trying to, be with whatever position or be with whatever circumstance, and allow what your experience is, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's unpleasant, to just be present with that experience. And there are a few experiences more immediately unpleasant than a 300-pound man with his chest hair in your mouth, smashing down on you, trying to strangle you and break your limbs. And like, so, like if you can keep your cool when that's going on, you're really kind of doing an end run around some very old parts of the reptile brain that are like, get out. Oh my God.
Right.
So I do feel that's valuable. And yeah, it could apply directly to performance, I think, because, for a lot of people, getting in front of a crowd has some of those elements of panic inducing fear. It's been a long time since I felt that way.
Yeah.
But, being with discomfort is something that applies across life in every domain, really.
Right. And I think in much in the same way it is with jujitsu, I think that whenever we're up there on stage and the longer that we do it, the only reason why we get relatively comfortable on stage is because we're doing it. Like, because we've done it for so many times, it loses its, you don't have fear of the unknown after you've been up there for forever. Just like if you're in there getting smashed by a 300-pound dude, you're probably you're probably not going to be that afraid. I mean, you carry yourself a little bit differently in the world. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
for sure.
You're not out there looking for fights, but you're also not walking around going, I don't know what could happen. You're just like, okay, could I shoot a double on this guy? Do you think I could?
Yeah, right.
He looks like he has a shitty base.
He's pretty big, but I could probably get his back.
Yeah.
And then, No, I think that's true. And I think that's valuable. I mean, I'm not one to walk around feeling afraid in the world anyway. I mean, I could. It's not that I'm impervious to fear so much as just that I really love people, and I have a high, like, novel experiences have a very high appeal in my life. I've traveled a lot. I've been in a lot of really sketchy and outright dangerous situations. And so, I don't shy away from that, but there's something very reassuring, if I'm out with my partner or something, to know that if something happened, I would be able to, stand a fair chance of defending myself and her. And like, I don't think about it that much because I don't believe the world is as terrible a place as some people do. It's really just a matter of how your nervous system is tuned. I think is how much of that you see. It's also probably a matter of what you've experienced and where you are and everything like that. But I think feeling a certain amount of competence in handling yourself in a tough situation is a really good thing. It really brings some peace of mind.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense to me. All right, let me get into another question here, man. So
Sure thing. Feel free to cut me off anytime too. I ramble a lot.
I love this conversation because I haven't always been a very open person. I haven't always been a very like I would call maybe enlightened or just a person that has, a fluid kind of look at life. I've before I've been very hardline on a bunch of different things. I've been very, I had a odd upbringing, so it's like, a lot of things have been difficult, and I spent a long time being a victim. And then, like, when I got into jujitsu, right? Yeah, it changed my life in a certain way where I was like, oh, maybe I need to understand that, not everybody comes to the same place at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's like whenever I meet somebody that's not the nicest person, I don't immediately write them off. Now I'm like, I wonder what contributed to this, because nobody wakes up in the morning like, I want to be a shit person. Like,
no, there's causes and conditions for everything.
Yeah. So getting these kind of conversations, just this kind of reaffirms to me that there's a lot of people that are on different sections of their path. There are a lot of people that are different parts of their journey right now. And, talking to somebody that has these kind of some of the same life experiences just reaffirms that, we all get there. Hopefully, if we're lucky enough, especially when we're men, if we're lucky enough to get rid of the ego, the earlier you can do that.
Absolutely.
Like the better you're going to do in all areas of life.
or at least get around it, because there may not be any completely getting rid of the
Oh
ego,
yeah.
and in fact that might not be desirable, because I forget whose quote this was, but they said, you've got to know whose mouth to put the fork in, right? When you eat,
Ah,
you
that's
got
a
to you got to keep yourself, you got to be able to keep yourself alive, but you can recognize the ego for what it is, which is just like a function of your mind, a pattern of thoughts and such, rather than like the driver of the
mm,
car, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, how do you know? Because you have so many songs out, because you're kind of always, trying to get your message, I would almost call it, into the world, and having people hear it. How do you know when a song is ready to record? Like, do you have
Mm.
any kind of specific way that you kind of go, now it's ready?
No, actually, I just do it, and then it reveals to me in that process whether it was or not. There were several songs that didn't make this new album. There was at least one or two that didn't make the last, that I fully expected were going to be on there. In fact, that I really wanted to be on there. But somewhere along the lines of, there's a difference between a good song and a good track. I'm sure
Mm,
you understand what I'm
yeah.
talking about there. Just like a good recorded track, something that just really worked in some way. And uh, so I would bring songs into a recording project, really feeling strongly about the song, really wanting to hear it as a recorded track, and it just didn't work out. There was one on this last album that kind of broke my heart. The song was called "The Man in the Moon Looks Surprised," and I really liked the song. I went in there with the bass player and the drummer, incredible musicians, and they hold up with me for about a week of like 8-hour days, and we
Mm,
just put down all the basic tracks. I thought we had something kind of solid. I did the vocal over and over and over again. It wasn't quite going the way I wanted it to. Brought in an accordion, put that on there, another fantastically talented friend of mine. And in the end, as I was listening to the rough mixes, I said, this didn't work. This song just didn't work, and I had to let it go. And it made me sad. It was sad to let it go. Um,
but you
but
also
for the sake
knew,
of the
yeah,
yeah, for the sake of the album, I mean, you're trying to make good art, and that's already a subjective enough thing as it is.
oh,
But if you're putting
yeah,
something out there that in your heart isn't good, how can you ask for anyone's attention with
yeah.
it? So I guess that's the answer, is that I don't often know. And every album I've made, the songs have been in varying degrees of readiness. Sometimes they're songs I've been playing for years, but more often than not, they're songs I've just written, or fairly recently. So some of them might never have been performed live. There are a couple on this new album that I had never done at a show. Um, and so it's kind of a process of fleshing them out and finding out what their nature is, I guess, in a way. And that's where the magic of being in the studio happens for me, because those surprises, like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen on that song. I didn't know there was going to be a sousaphone in that, but now there is. Like, that's
Right,
cool.
right.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love to watch those. I love to watch that unfold. And that's, for me, what's so interesting. That's why I'm working towards, one of the reasons I'm working towards, the ultimate goal is for me to do all my own stuff in my own studio. But this home studio I'm in right now, we live on the Susquehanna River, right on the bank, and the train tracks go right by, and it's not going to handle that sort of,
Precision.
in
Yeah.
yeah, it's what we're hoping to do is tear down this terrible old shed that's kind of half collapsing in our yard, and build a two-story structure, the top of which will be my recording studio. So that's the current fantasy.
Very
Just
nice.
because I love to play in the studio, and I would like to get into working with some other people as well, other artists, and maybe just making as many records as I have time to before I die.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I think you also go through a process in the same way that you were talking about. Maybe if the song doesn't fit, I think you also go through a process of some songs just aren't right for that album. Like,
Yeah,
right? You
absolutely.
so you probably do you keep some kind of, all right, this one's not ready for this one, but maybe at some point it'll fit the feel of another album. Is that like a practice that you go through too as well, you think?
Yeah, certainly. Well, there was one on this last album. I did a couple of songs for the album that I brought in a Dixieland jazz band to back me on them. So, it
That
was a
sounds awesome.
trumpet and a trombone and a clarinet, and they were badass. They were great. The Cat's Pajamas, I believe, is the name of the band. They're based out of Lancaster area, but they came in and we did 2 tracks with them. One of them was kind of like a cynical little number about Valentine's Day that I wrote for my girlfriend when I was on the road one year on Valentine's Day and feeling like kind of a jerk about it. And then the other one was this song I wrote in New Orleans about being at the Mardi Gras. And it ended up, even though those 2 tracks were with the same lineup and everything, one of them made it on the album. And then the Valentine's Day track, I thought, this would be better as a single. I'm just going to release this as a single. And then I kept it off of the album just because I don't know, something about it didn't quite fit with the flow of those songs. So these days it's so common for people to release singles instead of albums. Oftentimes I still love albums. I'm kind of old school like that. I love a collection of songs and how the kind of emergent thing that creates, when all the songs get together, there's this other entity that kind of emerges as the album. And I love that. But, singles it's cool because you can kind of release things on a more consistent basis and give new material to people. And I think that's very important, especially now.
Yeah, in today's society where I've recently, with diving into YouTube and stuff, I've recently realized that if I upload a video that's 30 seconds and I upload a video that's 30 minutes, the 30-second video is going to get 20x amount of views compared to the 30-minute.
Let me tell you about my most popular video of all time. It's not one of the songs that I spent hours writing, hours recording, mixing, editing. It is a 26-second reel of a chipmunk running over my bare toes on an island in Maine, which I made no effort whatsoever to promote. I just was practicing guitar on an island in Maine where I'd spent the night in my van. There's a chipmunk frolicking around outside. That's what chipmunks do. They frolic. That's why they're famous. And I thought, okay, well, that'll be cute. People will enjoy watching this chipmunk frolic. So took out the camera, and in the course of 26 seconds, it ran over my bare toes and disappeared under the van. I put it up on Instagram. No hashtags, no ad money. Why would you, right? It was a chipmunk. I drive down about an hour south to where my gig is in Maine that day, and my phone is just blowing up in my pocket. I look at Instagram. This thing already has 25,000 views, and people are commenting on it, my toes. They're like, "Oh, he got some funky toes. Look at that." No, people I don't know. So I guess like the Instagram algorithm just saw chipmunk and was like, "Hell yeah," and chucked it out there into the mainstream. And this video, to this day, if you look at my Instagram reels, the next highest one is probably 3,000 views. This thing has 30,000 views. And it was that moment that I realized that I just am never going to make it on the internet. And I kind of stopped trying. Up until then, I was thinking about like content creation and stuff. But, and I salute you for doing that, because it's something I don't feel that I have. It's too destructive for the conservation of my attention to actually making things I care about. I almost don't look at social media anymore. I go on in the morning during my office hours, where I keep office hours for booking and, emails and stuff like that. I go in the morning and I post what I've got to post, and I just get out because, I'm just going to be that old guy who doesn't quite get the internet. I'm comfortable with that role now. I think.
I think it's a better, as far as mental health goes. I think that is a appropriate approach. Using social media as a tool and not as a resource is such a better way to use social media. I hate it because, I can't say hate, but I don't like the fact that everything that I do as, podcast or musician or all of these different, I have to do constant promotion. I have to do all of these things. And it's just like, I don't really want to promote. I don't want to get up in the morning and be like, okay, well, how many groups can I share my video to today? What I mean? It's so dumb.
It's terrible.
I'd rather just create the content and then just put it out in the ether and be like, okay.
So that's what I've started doing. And I know that's not the way, it's not, but I do prioritize my peace over everything else and my creativity. And, I think that anyone I'm going to be of use to as an artist is going to be better off if I spend my day working on new songs and new music, and playing music out in public rather than like agonizing over. Somebody asked me recently, like, oh, when you do this or that in a video, how does it affect your analytics? And I said, I barely even know what you're talking about. Like I do, but just barely.
Right.
I can't imagine spending my day looking at that stuff. And it's not that I never have, or I don't want to make it sound like I think I'm, above this or anything. I've just learned through hard experience that, it's really, and I'm very into meditation and stuff like that. So I think a lot about where my attention goes and what's coming in to my conscious purview and so I find that when I'm looking at too much social media, all of other people's worst thoughts are now part of my mind and they're in there. It's like walking around in a room full of people you don't know, and each one has a bowl and a spoon. And you walk up to each person and they say, have a bite of this. And they shove the spoon in your mouth and they feed you whatever they want. You don't know what it's going to be until it's already in there.
Right.
And you're just taking bites of it. Like people are just putting, maybe they're just having a bad day and they want to say something shitty, and that's what you're going to get. Or Lord knows all the hate. If you look at anyone who's famous, their Instagram or whatever, it's just a nightmare of haters. It could be Mother Teresa and it doesn't matter. It's just, there's,
so, like her hair was fucked up in this picture. You're like, what? She's Mother Teresa. What are you doing? Yeah, fucking terrible. Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it, man. I've recently dived into that kind of world of meditation, and like last year we went to a bunch of like I call them hippie festivals. They're not really. It's like ecstatic dance festivals, right?
Oh, cool.
And that's like I'm like, this is incredible. Like, where was this my entire life? I don't even dance. Yeah. But I'll tell you.
Me either.
a little bit of
but
cacao.
I'd like to.
Yeah. And what I liked about the ecstatic dance festivals is like at the beginning, we all do like a guided meditation. Everybody they give you a pen and a paper and you write down your intention for the evening or for the event. Right. And then everybody throws their paper into the fire at some point, and then you dance or you do whatever. And one of the things that I really loved about that is that, my intention in the first one, I just wrote down, I want to be free. Like, I want to feel free. And that's really it.
Aspiration. Yeah,
right?
That's the highest aspiration you could have, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
from freedom flows everything else. From freedom flows compassion and joy and peace and all of that stuff. I think you have to be free first and foremost.
Yeah, and free as yourself, right? Because like when you're truly being yourself and you're not concerned with what other people think so much, and I can't say you're always probably going to be somewhat concerned about what people think of you, but there's probably a certain point you can get to where it's not your forethought. It's an afterthought, right? I'm
now more concerned with how other people feel of me, which is to say less their opinion of me than like I want them to feel good, when they're, I want, I would like my life to make other people's lives just a little bit better, and I'm not overly ambitious about it. I know I'm not going to save anybody's soul, but if I can make the people whose lives are touched by mine just a little bit better than they otherwise might be, then I feel like that's a pretty useful, purpose. And so I'm less concerned with what they think of me. I mean, I generally assume I come off as a weirdo to a lot of people, and that's probably true. Maybe not as many as I think, but I kind of feel like humans are weirdos in general. So
yes, yeah,
that's I'm not too far outside the pack there. But I'm more concerned with how they feel. Like if I cause hurt to someone, then that's my business, and that interests me. And if somebody derives some joy from something that I've done, then that's the nicest compliment I can get. Those tend to be, these days, my favorite performance compliments are not about like how good my songs are or how good a singer I am or guitar playing or whatever. That's all very nice to hear, but nobody cares about it except for your ego. What I like is, I was playing one night at this hotel bar, and there was this couple in the back who were kind of dancing to the songs and making a lot of eye contact with me and stuff. They're an older couple. And at the end, at the end of the night, they came up, and the woman had tears in her eyes. And she said, my mom died 2 weeks ago, and this is the first night we've had out together since my mom died, and we just had such a nice time, listening to your music and dancing to your songs. And I just really want to thank you for that. And that was the nicest
Mm,
compliment I think I've ever gotten. Like this woman's grieving one of the biggest personal losses that she'll probably have, and she had a nice night, and I was a little part of that somehow.
right.
That's a compliment. That's something to take to your heart and cherish, because all that stuff about, am I as good as this person, am I good enough, am I better than this person, that's not going to be satisfying in the long term, but things like that will.
Dude,
I
I
think.
I feel I feel that so much. I'm in the same boat. I think that judging people's musicianship, as somebody, especially these people that don't play music, they think that what we
Yeah,
do is wizardry the right? They think that the chord,
sure.
they don't understand it. So I'm sure it does. Like, and all of that is being subjective. So they're looking at it, but their feelings aren't subjective. The way that you make them
Yeah,
feel, that is theirs, and that's their own feeling. And
yeah.
I feel exactly the same way. I had a guy at my show I was playing in Hagerstown, and there was a guy that came up and was like, "Hey, my dad and I's favorite song was Touch of Grey by the Grateful Dead."
Oh,
And he's like, "Do
love
you
that song.
play?" Yeah, he's like, "Do you play Touch of Grey?" And I'm like, "I don't." And he's like, "Hey, you're playing here again in like 3 weeks. Any chance you would want to learn it?"
That's awesome.
And I'm like, "Yeah, man. You know what? I'll play for you." He's like, "Yeah, he passed away, and it just that song really makes me feel close to him." And dude, when I played it, the guy started like bawling in the bar,
Yeah.
and I was like,
And that's what a wonderful gift to be able to give somebody too,
"Oh my
because
god, yeah,
that brought him back to all those times with his dad, and like, you facilitated him having that, feeling that connection with, someone that's departed. And
yeah,
that's the good stuff about being a musician, and I've been really leaning into more of that lately. Like what I kind of like to I've always viewed myself as like a blue collar creative type. I don't have any expectation of like big time anything at all.
mm,
I kind of view myself as like somebody who is working embedded within a community and serving various functions in that community. Like when people are born, I might I played at a 1-year old's birthday party one time recently. I play when people die. I play for people who are dying, in end of life care. Um, I play when people are joined in marriage. And it's kind of like this very real, community job, just like I'm the guy that makes noises that are part of your life, and I really cherish that privilege,
yeah,
of being able to be part of people's lives in that way, the soundtrack of their lives, which is
yeah,
powerful. We
absolutely,
really connect to it.
yeah." I've talked about it on a bunch of episodes, but we're light workers, right? And
Yeah, sure.
when I started approaching my career, because I quit my job in 2021 to kind of be a full-time musician, and I was like, I'm
Nice.
not going to do the welding anymore. I'm going to go be a
It's a
musician.
very bold decision.
Yeah, right. And it worked for me because I was willing, and I treated it like a business for a while, and because I just started playing guitar in 2018, right? So like for me, it was whenever I wanted to make the transition, I didn't have original music. So I'm like, I'm just going to play as many covers as I possibly can. And I'm going to get out there and I'm going to like run this thing like a business. I'm going to market myself. I'm going to do so I did all the things that I needed to do to be like financially successful. But man, it was a job. And then like last year, I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to play other people's songs 5, 6, 7 days a week. Like,
Yeah.
so I got bitter. And then about halfway through last year, I was like, a lot of times I'm it's not the songs that I play. It's not whatever that is. It's the environment that I create for people to escape the world that we're in sometimes, the world that they're in, whatever they're going through. They can come out and request a song and I can play it and it's going to make their night better. So whenever I started approaching it more of I'm like, I'm a light worker. That's what I do. I bring light into people's lives. And like you put it perfectly there. I provide a soundtrack. They're going to remember, oh, you remember when we were out at the bar and he played this song, we all sang along. You know what I mean? It's like a moment in time that it's like having a smell or something from that time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And music does work in the memory as strongly as, smell is another thing that's very closely tied to memory for people. I can sniff lilac, and
Mm.
it brings me back to the bush that grew outside of my home when I was a child, and I can kind of be there in childhood again. And there's a really fascinating documentary called Alive Inside on YouTube, where they go into different memory care units, like dementia wards, basically, with people who are really locked into themselves and maybe haven't are very little or not communicative at all. And they bring them little iPods with their favorite music on it.
Mm.
And it's incredible the way these people just open up like flowers. They'll start telling stories about their lives. They'll start dancing and singing. And I've experienced this to some extent because I work, part of I'm also a full-time musician, and I've spent years avoiding having a real job. And I think I'm probably too old to have any other employable skills at this point. But part of that is I play in, nursing homes and things like that, and dementia facilities. And I also do volunteer work with people in end of life care and hospice. So
Mm.
I have the opportunity to play for a lot of people who are suffering from cognitive disorders ranging, from minor to extremely severe, to the point where they are unable to have a conversation. And it's really amazing to see the connection that music can make
Wow.
with people like that. And interestingly, I've come at it from the other direction that you did. I started off as like uncompromising songwriter guy. Like, you're going to get the show I want to give you. You're going to hear my stuff. If you want to hear I've told so many people, like, if you want to hear country roads, the good news is you can bounce a rock down the street. It'll bounce off 3 other guys who are right now playing country roads.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
But I've softened on that a lot. And now when I do a bar gig, I do it's a bar gig. So of course I do covers. I do probably, depending on the gig, I might do half covers anymore at a bar gig. And there'll be ones that I like because I don't know if anyone wants to really see me sing songs that I dislike, but I'll totally do requests for people. And I'll do my best to make those requests happen. I have a pretty good memory for songs. So if I've heard it before, I can probably fake my way through it. And my rule is that if you're in end of life care, you get any damn song you want. I don't care what it is.
That's awesome, man.
I'll learn it for you. I've learned some of the damnedest things for that reason. But I don't know if this is relevant to our recording, but your picture has been frozen on my screen for about 5 minutes.
Oh, that's fun. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Hopefully it's different on your end, because I can hear you fine and everything.
Yeah, it still looks good on my side. I'll try to refresh on this side, and then I can cut that back out. Let's see if that does anything for you. Did that help at all? Probably not.
No, it's the same thing.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I guess.
You look. If it's any consolation, you look fine.
You just get to look at that part of me for a while. Yeah.
You look fine.
That's okay.
No problem.
So yeah, man. So what is you just came back. You were in Ireland. Was that last month or the month before?
September, yeah.
September. We were close. All the months tend to run together this time of the cold year.
Increasingly, yeah.
Yeah. So I have some questions for you. So
yeah.
First of all, what is it like performing overseas, man? Like what is that? How many times have you? I think you've been over there a couple times, kind of in those European countries. Yeah. So how is that?
I've done a few like tours, like proper tours in Ireland. I think 4. This is the first as a solo act, but I've done tours with bandmates over there. And then I spent about 3 months one year busking my way across Europe from Ireland I made it as far as Romania, Transylvania, Romania.
Whoa.
And so that was a hell of a trip. So yeah, I played in a lot of European countries, mostly on the street, but in Ireland, it's strange how different the vibe is. And I always explain it as, I view it as maybe because storytelling and song are so central to their culture, particularly like the pub culture. If you're playing music in a pub in Ireland, you know that experience where sometimes you're doing a bar gig and just nobody really gives a shit. They're not really looking at you. They're not really paying attention to you. They're not really clapping.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you can usually win a few of them over, but often sometimes it's just going to be like that. That's not a thing in Ireland that I've ever experienced. Like if you're playing music in a bar, they're engaging with it on a pretty energetic level. I'm not saying you will have like their silent and rapt attention every time, because there's still bar gigs, where people are getting, they're drinking pretty, they're getting pretty Irish about it,
Right,
but
right.
but there's a respect for music and storytelling in the culture, uh, where if you're doing it, they're going to be engaging with it. So I've never like had a song end and not gotten applause in Ireland. Like they're yelling, they're screaming, they're talking to you, they're interacting. So I have a blast playing for Irish people. I was thinking about editing. My girlfriend Kim was with me on this last trip, and she was taking a lot of little videos and stuff. And I've thought about editing together some clips and calling it "Leo Sings with Irish People" and putting it up as a little reel, because I have like video of me singing a Nirvana song with a bunch of young Irish people in this one pub, and they're all like, we're singing Lithium, and they're all singing along, and
Oh, that's
it's the
awesome.
best. And see, and that's the stuff that I would have missed when I was so full of myself when I was younger and thought like, oh, my original song is the only thing, worth offering in this situation, because obviously that's nonsense. We have this whole beautiful shared canon of music that we can all relate to from different times in our lives. And it would, and that, why would I not want to play the songs that I love and that other people love? So
Yeah,
I'm glad
man.
I got over myself in that regard. I'm still not at the point where I don't think I'll be having like a covers menu at any point in the near future. It's just not really, I don't do a lot of like modern top 40 stuff. So sometimes when people want that kind of thing, they're disappointed, but we usually land on something that, satisfies anyone who has a request, because just about anybody will say like, well, do you know a Beatles song? I'm like, I know all the Beatles songs.
Right? Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so we can usually find something. I go at least as far as the 90s,
I
and
like
then it's
that.
probably about as, if you want to hear anything more modern than the 90s, it's going to be a Leo Disanto song, and that's, or maybe one by one of my friends or something.
Yeah, yeah. I know one of the things that I had, so my most viewed video on YouTube is a cover of Dropkick Murphys' Rose Tattoo.
Oh, nice.
I did
That's
it.
a good tune.
Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah. It's such a fun song to play, and I was like, I want to figure out a way to play it acoustic. So I started. This was like 4 or 5 months after I started playing guitar. I just sat at my desk and put a camera on and sang to it, and it's got like 40,000 views or something on Facebook or on
Dang, that's
YouTube,
a lot.
which is ridiculous, right? But so I gained a lot of like overseas followers off of that. And I know when they are watching one of my YouTube videos of a live performance now, because every single time I put one up, they'll comment, why is everyone talking? They'll be like, "What? Right? What is
Yeah.
wrong with Americans?"
Yeah.
That's mostly what I hear
I
from
know.
them is like, "Why is it like the one video? There was a bunch of people with their backs to me, and they just never even turned around. Like the song was over, they didn't even acknowledge that the song had happened. And this guy's like, that's the first thing he put. He's like, Americans are so ignorant. And then he's like, why did they not turn around? He's like, that would never happen. Come play in Ireland. So it's funny that you said that same thing.
Yeah, I mean come play in Ireland is good advice, because it really is a blast. It's a beautiful country. The people are just, it's the people who make the biggest impression as far as I'm concerned, and others I've been there with agree. 'Cause they're just so friendly that when you're first confronted with it, it almost seems like you're being put on, just like how helpful and friendly people are willing to be. And I'm not, now I don't want to come off wrong and act like I'm saying Americans aren't. I've
No,
traveled all over America. I love the people here. I think the people in America are much better than they look on paper. They're much better than they look on social media. You can't, that's not real life, folks. You can't judge people by what they say on social media. They're being watched and they know it. There's a lot of good people out there in America too, but like there is a different way of relating to people in public, and a different level of kind of, familiarity. And I think part of that is just the vast cultural differences. I was hitchhiking once through a particularly desolate region of Ireland called the Ring of Kerry in the southwestern part of the state. It's mountainous, it's rugged, it's pretty remote. And I was picked up. I had no trouble getting rides. I was being picked up by old women in their 80s traveling alone. I was being picked up by single mothers in their 30s with like a 2-year-old daughter in the back traveling alone. That would be absolute batshit insanity in this country, to pick up some scruffy looking dude with a backpack and a guitar
Oh yeah.
on a desolate country road traveling alone with your daughter. But they had no fear. And so finally I got up the nerve to ask this guy about it. I said, why isn't anyone scared to pick me up? And he said, oh, we just, there's not that much violence here. It's not that
Wow.
people aren't afraid of being murdered because not that many people get murdered. And it really blew my mind. It was one of those times when the cultural blinders come off, and it also made me profoundly sad for us
Right.
because, like, just nobody has guns over there. And, I'm not like wading into the whole thing about whether or not anyone should. That's a discussion that's outside of our purview right now, but
Hmm.
nobody does. And they just don't have much reason to fear each other. And that comes across in the personal interactions.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So when you're overseas and you go over there to play, what's your gear setup when you fly over there to play? What do you bring? Do you grab stuff while you're there and then hawk it before you leave? How does that work?
I mean, being an acoustic solo guy makes that all pretty easy. I bring my guitar, and I bring my little preamp box. It's a tone bone preamp, acoustic preamp, because I really like the way it sounds with my pickups and my guitar. And my own 1/4 inch cable, my own vocal mic, all those things fit into the gig bag of the guitar, and my harmonica case and rack, and my own picks and some extra strings and that kind of thing. And then most of the rest of what you would need, you'd get over there. I did have to touch base about that with all the venues I booked. Like, do you have a PA? And some of them would say no, and be like, well, can we get one?
Right.
Or is it possible to do the gig without one? Like, what kind of there was one bar, it was so small, I just kind of stood on a table and just belted it out. I knew I had the day off the next day, so I wasn't too worried about my voice. Normally doing that for 3 hours would maybe be a bad idea, but I knew I had the next day off, so I just kind of let it rip.
Just went
And
for it. Yeah.
yeah, I had a case of merch with me, which it's helpful when you're traveling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you find, and I know, like, for me, whenever I go out of state to play and I bring my merch moves so much faster when I'm on the road than it does at a home show. uh,
Usually I would say so, but lately it hasn't been as much. And
yeah.
I don't know if that's just kind of a function of how things are going, for people in different places economically or what, but
Mm.
it's getting tougher and tougher to sell music for sure because of the streaming thing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
started getting vinyls with my last album, and I'll have vinyl of this album too. And people do like those. It's probably at the point where, I don't know, maybe more people want vinyl than CDs, and a lot of people don't even have the means to play a CD anymore.
Right.
So I've had so many people come up to me after a show and say, "Oh man, this is great. I'd totally buy your music if I had anything that played any of these round objects that you have to sell. Yeah, I'll be listening to it for sure." And that just might be the way things are going. I don't know.
Do you think there's and I did a episode just a little while ago on music licensing, BMI, ASCAP, all that stuff, and just
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
what it meant to venues and, live music performers. And I think that there's a certain thing that happened, and I know it started with like Napster and all that, I'm pretty sure, but now it almost seems like everybody thinks that music on a general part is included in your subscription to iTunes or Spotify. And if you can't get it there, then you don't need it. It seems,
Yeah,
unless you get a
yeah.
vinyl. And vinyl, you're buying the vinyl. Half the people that buy vinyls don't even have a means to play the vinyl.
That's true. That
It's
might be true. Yeah.
it's like a memorabilia thing. Um,
I think it's so challenging these days because, it's almost as though anything that you want to, any kind of media you want to consume, whether it be books, podcasts, music, news articles, you need a subscription for almost everything. And I know, like, somebody like me, being a professional blue collar musician, you know, money's pretty thin all the
Mm,
time. So I can't have all these different subscriptions to all these different things. And yet it's completely fair for all of these different entities to want to be paid for their work and their creations. So as a musician, we're kind of another person trying to hawk subscriptions to ourselves.
mm,
I have a Patreon page. Um, it's been important for me over the years, but it's a very hard sell to get new patrons for it, at least from where I'm standing, just because it's another subscription. I think people are coming to understand it better. When I first started it in the late 2000 teens or whatever, I don't think people even understood exactly what was being asked. And now because the subscription model is so widespread, they do. But how do you convince people to get another subscription? And most people are shocked when they understand that, when they come to understand that Spotify and the streaming services don't actually pay us. And now they literally don't pay us at all. They just pass some new thing where if you're under 1,000 streams in a year for any given song, they just divert all that money. I don't know if it goes into the
right.
pockets of the executives or the bigger artists or what. So, you get your mechanical royalties and whatever through the PROs, but that's, for most of us at this level, that's not very much. And neither
Right.
was the Spotify money, but at least it was a token. So I don't really, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have too many ideas for how to make that fly. I feel fortunate that there are people who will support me, and they kept me going when I was making a living off a live stream during the pandemic.
Mm,
When I do a Kickstarter to raise money for my albums, they're there. When my van breaks down on the side of the road and I do a live stream concert to get it fixed, they're there. Uh, so just knowing that there's this kind of core group of people who care enough to support me, um, is heartening. I don't really know how to make it fly in any kind of
I get that.
higher level. It's challenging. It's everybody wants your attention, and they all want some money after you give them the attention too.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I know my friend Patrick Garrity. He's a like a national touring comedian, and he has a Patreon, and he has like different tiers like everybody else, right? And
Yeah,
he's like, you wouldn't believe how hard it is to get somebody to subscribe for $1
it is.
a
Yeah, I don't
month.
think I'm not sure they understand that's for real. Because I try to include that every time I've mentioned my Patreon. Like, you can support me for as little as $1 a month, and it's makes a big difference. That
Right.
just having those supporters. And I don't think people understand. And now the algorithms don't want to even show that stuff to people unless you put all kinds of ad money on it. And the amount of ad money they suggest you put on it keeps going up and up and up.
Yep.
Last time I took out a Facebook ad, it was like, most businesses like you put down $100. I was like, they do.
Yeah.
Last time, most businesses like me only put down $30. Like, how's
Right.
everybody else 3 times as rich and I'm not? I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I always thought and I don't know if this would work or not, but just a thought of mine was having a Patreon level that is, let's say it's $2 a month or $5 a
Yeah.
month, something like that. But you get my album release for free. You get
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You like all of these different things, even if it's $1 a month, and you have somebody that's 20, what is that? That's $12 a year. So $12. I'm like, okay, a CD press is $3 nowadays. The recording time is not that awesome, but so you're at least going to get your cost back on the physical media itself that you would have for a CD. And
Yeah.
then, if you get 500 people or so giving it, $500, that's $6,000 a year. That's enough to get an album out. And it's like, I think that would be obtainable for people that have like, I would say 500 or 1,000, dedicated people. But getting
Yeah.
500 to 1,000 dedicated people to even pay $1 is probably not that easy. So
No, it's not. Like, I have I've got a few thousand followers on social media. And if even like, if 10% of those people were to join the Patreon, just 10, which doesn't seem that ambitious, it would more than double my Patreon in size.
yeah,
But I don't think that will happen. And I don't, there's only a certain amount of haranguing I'm willing to do, because I see
I
some
get that.
musicians who are just like, it's so hard being a musician, please support it. And like, I get that, but I don't like the look of it. I don't like the feel of it. It's not even the look. I don't like the feel of it. And I'm kind of just more into trusting in the generosity these days and allowing ways that that can happen. You know, I'm actually thinking about going the opposite way with my Patreon and making it all free and saying, you can support me and you can pay, or you can just get it for free, and
Yeah.
allowing it to be generosity. I got this idea from like Buddhist teachers who work in what they call the generosity economy, where they'll do a retreat, you know, whatever, 7-10 day meditation retreat. And then they'll say, you know, we don't get paid for this by the retreat center. You can give us what you think is fair, what you're able, what you feel comfortable, what won't burden you, or you can give us nothing, you know, and that's up to you. And I just thought that was such a beautiful way of doing it.
Mm.
I've made my downloads that way already, like my official downloads on my website. My website made me enter $1 as the minimum, but you can download for whatever you want, any of my albums, all my albums. I'm thinking about doing it with Patreon and just saying, you know, if you're able to support me and you're so inclined, please do. I really do rely on fan support, and I really do. But if you're not able or inclined, take the stuff anyway.
Yeah, I'd still
whatever,
like you to
listen
consume
to
it. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
and
listen
get
to
something out
music.
of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Shine Delphi. It was the guy that kind of first person I ever met where I was like, "How much are your CDs?" And he's like, "Whatever you want to
Whatever.
pay."
Yeah, he's like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to pay. And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Is $20 cool?" And he's like, "Absolutely, yeah, absolutely." And I'm like, "Cool." And I'm like, I think whenever I put out CDs, my first album, they were like $5 or $10. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I was like, I probably could have just told people to pay whatever they wanted. And maybe they would have thought it was worth more. Maybe they would have thought it was worth less. Maybe I would have, you know, got more CDs out of the first album if it would have been just me kind of, you know, here, I want you to have the media. I want you to be able to experience this. And I don't want money to be the barrier of entry. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I get
I
it.
think there's a gesture of good faith in there too. I mean, I've heard some podcasters and things that I've listened to who do that. They have a paywall on their podcast, but they'll say, you know, if money's an issue for you, get in touch with us and we'll, you know, you can have a subscription for free. And I think that's an ideal way to kind of navigate this whole subscription based attention economy thing, because man, I really just, my highest purpose is to imagine that I might make something like a song that people can use, you know, somehow in their lives. Like when somebody asked me for, you know, like somebody came to a gig one time and they said, you know, I would really like to hear your song, Little Blue Song. Last year I proposed to my fiance or my girlfriend here, and she said yes, and you were playing that song. And, you know, it's kind of our song now. It's like, that's, you know, that I would pay for that experience. You know, I would pay them for that experience almost just to feel useful in that way.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I want people to have the stuff, and I think it's a gesture of good faith. And it is important that people understand, though, that if you want there to be independent artists, you need to support independent artists, because Lord knows it's hard to make a living this way in this world.
Oh yeah.
In this economy. So like if live music's important to you, if local music's important to you, go out and see lots of live local music and throw some tips in their jar and buy their CD. Because otherwise there won't be those people. You know, it's very challenging to do, and not everyone's even in a position to do it. You know, I'm very aware that if I were in a different place in my life, if I had little kids or something like that, or, you know, like my brother is a full-time musician and he does have a little kid, and he, you know, like that's
so much
really
harder.
Living on the edge.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, let alone you have 3 kids or something.
Right.
You might not be able to pursue this particular line of work. So,
right. Yeah, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to be able to do it. And it's not a gigantic group of people that get to do this. And like you just said, like I know Shine, even whenever like the pandemic hit, he's like, I'm going to go work at Amazon. There's not enough work. Like
I heard you tell him that broke your heart, and I felt the same way. So
oh my God, it hurt. It hurt. Yeah.
I was like, no, because
Yeah.
I was afraid he wasn't going to come back. You know, I was afraid he was going to. I knew he had this house and he was going to get comfortable in the job, but that hasn't happened. He's pretty much gigging full time again.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
luckily for all of us.
Yeah. Thank God. Thank God we got it back. Let's talk about your album coming out, man, and then we'll get you out of here. But So you have an album coming out February 14th called "To Fly So Low." The signature track or the title track is out already on Apple Music. And
Is it?
it is.
I didn't tell him to do that.
You have a single release on there. So
Oh, geez.
I got a chance to listen to Fly So Low, and maybe other people will, unless you're able to get it pulled back down before this podcast goes up. But the track itself is very, very good. And I love the composition of the track. Can you tell me some about the album itself, where it came from, kind of what the feel was of the album was for you?
Yeah, there was a real emergent theme of like birds and flight on that album that I didn't actually plan, but I kind of leaned into once it started emerging. There's a lot of songs that mention birds, about birds. The first track on the album, which is called My Blue Dream, was actually inspired by a flock of sandhill cranes that flew over my van in Central Florida, and they were making this incredible racket, just this cacophonous song that they were all singing. Sounded kind of like a cross between man, I don't even quite know how to describe it. It was a sound unlike anything I've ever heard, and there were thousands of them all singing it. So I pulled out my phone and just made a little recording of it. And I was doing an experiment on that tour where I was recording kind of found sounds, like the sound of insects and lizards in the Everglades, or the sound of a thunderstorm in the South, and then kind of writing songs inspired by the sounds. So I wrote that song to those sandhill cranes, and that wound
Wow.
up being the first track on the album. I had never played it live, but I did it acoustic, and then I brought in some horns. It was my first time writing horn parts on this album, so I was excited to play around with that. And it just seemed to be it seemed to be a theme that just kind of kept coming around: birds and flight, and there's a lot about love and travel and adventure and death, which it was interestingly was kind of a premonition of a very major change in my life with my health that happened right before the album, when right before we started recording.
Mm.
And so I think it's an album of some sort of transition, some sort of major life transition. And I don't know, I like to leave that door mostly open for other people to kind of cross at the threshold in any way that might work for them. Like we were saying earlier, I don't love to tell people what things are about, and I don't really write songs often in such a way that they're about one particular thing or person anyway, although sometimes they kind of are.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's part of the songwriting process is saying what you want to say without saying it. I think that is a large part of it because it does leave it up to interpretation. And
yeah,
it
so
makes it
let's
more
see, are you
personal.
telling or are you showing? It depends. It
Yeah.
depends on what the song is. But one of the last tracks on the album is called "Outgo the Lights." It's one of the last, maybe the third to last or something. And that was the first song I ever wrote kind of in a dream. I'd always heard these stories about Paul McCartney and other geniuses like that writing songs in their sleep, and it never happened to me. But I was sleeping in my van on tour one time, and I woke up with this, just singing this melody, ba da 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 da, ba da 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 da, and I woke up and kind of just sang it into the tape recorder. And it ended up being a song about death, of course, kind of a memento mori. Have you ever heard of the art style known as
Yeah.
memento mori?
Yeah.
Remember that you will die, remember your mortality, which is something that I feel like most of us actually aren't well acquainted with. We know intellectually that we're temporary beings, that we're going to die, but I think when many of us, I know this was true for me, when you actually kind of bump up against it in some more real and immediate way, you're like, oh, me. Okay. I get it.
Right.
So that song is like a kind of a groovy sort of memento mori with a horn section, and it's pretty different than anything I've ever done. So I'm pretty proud of it. The album ranges from very spare acoustic ballads, which is me and the acoustic guitar, singing a love song, or there's a song to my late father on there. There's a song to my partner Kim, inspired by another bird, the great blue heron, and it ranges from things that are just me solo to like full on bands with horns, and like I said earlier, a Dixieland jazz band. So I think it has some shape to it, and I kind of like it in the album format. I kind of like to take people on a bit of a journey, like you have to lean in for the quiet songs, and you kind of then you can kind of lean back for the bigger songs. And so I like that about it, and I hope other people will feel that way too.
I love an album that has a certain flow to it, and it dictates your feeling. It's not to the same BPM. It's not written to be a smash hit on the radio. I like albums that have that feeling behind them. Like I felt that with your last album. Like it had a feeling. The album itself, like non-alcoholic beer, might be one of my favorite songs I've ever heard. As as a guy that just like, so for me, and I'm sure you experience this as well. Being a musician, we are like, most of the time we are the party. We are the people that show up, and they're like, everybody wants to give you drinks, everybody wants to give you smoke, like everybody wants to give you everything that they can do to make you have a good time, because that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
Non-alcoholic beer to me, I'm like, you wouldn't believe the amount of times in the last 6-7 months that I've just drank non-alcoholic beer on stage. People don't know, but I'm up there. It looks like I'm drinking a beer. I'm not drinking a beer.
It's all I've had in the last 6 years. In fact,
that's incredible. Yeah.
I wrote that song about a year after I got sober. After narrowly avoiding dying of alcoholism for many years, I got sober, and it was hard to get comfortable in that role of being the musician and being sober all of a sudden, because as you said, people really kind of like that character, the drunken troubadour character. And after I gave up drinking, I would show up at gigs and there'd be a bottle of my favorite whiskey sitting on my monitor speaker. People really wanted to play to that character. And I don't think they realized how much suffering was in it for me. But it was a weird identity shift to give it up. And writing that song in some weird way, I just wanted to write something that was funny about my predicament. I kind of wanted to make fun of myself, and somehow writing that song completely made me feel comfortable and oriented to the new place I was in. And after writing the song, and it gave me an in with the audiences too, because I'll often introduce it and I'll say, cheers with fake beers, and I'll hold up my non-alcoholic beer and I'll tell people, like, this is what I drink these days. And there's a lot of good non-alcoholic beers out there now, but there's not a lot of good non-alcoholic drinking songs. So here's one. And, it's wild because Ireland has gone non-alcoholic beer too. And I'd never expected in a million years. I kind of thought I wouldn't even be able to tour there anymore as a sober guy. I thought they wouldn't let me in the country, but they've got non-alcoholic Guinness on tap in every pub now. And it's wild.
I saw that you had one of those. I saw that on your social media that you had a non-alcoholic Guinness. And I'm like, I felt so good for you. Cause I was like, he's getting to experience that again.
It was like, it almost brought tears to my eyes. Cause I just thought, you think of these little experiences, there'll be a last time for every experience you can have. And I thought that time had already happened for me, standing in a pub in Ireland, listening to a trad session with a Guinness in my hand. And there I was doing it. So it was really, it was really kind of a moment. And that stuff is, I'm not being paid by them to say this, of course, but that non-alcoholic Guinness is really delicious stuff. If they want to pay me to say it, hit me up.
Yeah. You got a Patreon. When I heard that song, the non-alcoholic beer, I was just like, it's such a playful song, but it's also so insightful. It's like packed full of like kind of reflections on the benefits of having a non-alcoholic beer as compared to drinking a beer. Because if I have people come up to me all the time and they're like, how do you do it? Like, if you're playing 4, 5, 6 nights a week and are you drinking every night? I'm like, no, that's impossible. I did it for a while. I
used to, right? I did.
Yeah.
I did for years.
It's just not a long game.
I said, I really almost died, numerous times, I think. And, no, you can't. I mean, and not to mention what it does to your vocal cords, and just the soul crushing angst that it brings down on you. Yeah. I salute people who manage to balance that. For me, the only way to balance it in the end was just to not do it at all. And the peace and joy that have been made available as a result of that decision, I could never have imagined.
Mm.
But yeah, the song is actually, I'm glad you noticed that because it's actually kind of dark if you listen to what's being said. It
Uh-huh.
sounds funny, but like that's all stuff that was really my life, like on a greasy spot in the parking lot, waking up in a parking lot. It's
Oh
kind of
yeah.
like graveyard humor in a way.
It is. It is. It is. And
So that's been one that people have responded to, and that makes me happy that they do because it's both really goofy and dumb and really personal at the same time.
yeah. I found when I stopped really drinking on a regular occasion when I was playing, I found that my playing improved. I found that my
Oh
singing
yeah, oh yeah,
improved like dramatically. Like it's incredible. I told my
totally.
I told my girlfriend, I was like, whenever, because I like to watch a lot of game day footage, so I like record most of my shows, at least a little clip of it, and then I watch it back. And it's not because I like to watch myself at all. Like
No,
most of the time, I'm
it's a
like,
useful tool.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like watching the difference between drinking or whatever Dave and sober Dave, holy crap, is that just it's drinking makes me think I'm incredible at what I'm doing, right? Like in the
I'm putting
moment.
on such a show right now.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then I watch it back, I'm like, oh my God, what was that? Like you didn't even hit a single note in that song. Like it's so
Oh
bad.
my God. People asked me, there are a few friends who asked me, even musician friends, like, don't you find that it's hurt your creativity to be sober? I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I feel like in order to ask that, you've either you've never been an addict or you've never been a creative type, because like
Mm,
I write 10 times as many songs now as I did then. Like my songwriting output had dwindled. I think I was with a band called Vinegar Creek Constituency, and I think we made an album in 2013, and then it was 2018 before we made the next one. Now I'm writing an album worth of material easily every year, maybe 2 albums worth of material. Like it, I don't. Alcohol is not.
it's
I
not
don't
an
know. I mean,
enhancer.
some people won't agree with me on this, and I'm totally comfortable with that. But I don't think it's any kind of an ally to creative people.
Mm,
It's not the alcohol that's doing it. It's the fact that you have this overflowing, overwhelming feeling of passion about life that maybe is causing you to self-medicate with alcohol, but that's the thing that's talking, and you can explore it in ways that don't involve bludgeoning your awareness into submission with alcohol. Now, I'm not lecturing people about drinking. Like if you
mm-mm.
can drink and it's not causing you and other people around you suffering, by all means, like hoist one for me. I miss the taste of beer and wine and a good bourbon.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like if you're cool with it, then by all means. But like if you think it's essential to your identity as an artist or something, I would beg to differ. And like, so would Tom Waits. He wrote all his best, all of my favorite Tom Waits albums came after he got sober. And,
Oh yeah.
I'm sure we could find a lot of other examples of this too.
Yeah, I think it. I think in a lot of ways, what it does, it's not a smart weapon, right? Alcohol or drugs or anything, they're not. It's not like a smart bomb. What it does is it just quiets everything.
Yeah, it
It
does.
quiets all that internal. So it quiets the bad stuff, the stuff you want to forget about. That stuff goes away, but
Sure.
so does the
Yeah.
good stuff. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's not this incredible. Oh no, now I feel incredible. It's not. That's not the way it works. So that's it's great to hear that your kind of creativity actually got a bump from kind of getting away from that. No matter what the mechanism was behind that,
Yeah,
it's
for
great.
sure. And maybe it's legitimately different for other people. Maybe for other people it is an ally creatively. I'm not going to over apply my own experience here,
Sure.
but people who might be clinging to it only because of that should really know that I've had this experience where I think I've done all my best work since getting sober and written all my most honest um, you know s- songs since then too. So
Yeah.
like it's certainly out there for you. Don't think that you have to
I always tell
be
people try it.
inebriated.
I
Yeah.
always tell like anybody who is stuck, if you're stuck in something right now, try something different. Like
Yeah.
that's it. And if it doesn't work, go back to drinking. It's not going to go anywhere. Like, I mean, you're still going to get offered free beers at your next gig.
It's definitely not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. So, but if it's
been a part of culture for thousands of years, and I suspect it will continue to be so.
Absolutely. Well,
but non-alcoholic beer keeps getting better. So.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. The Heineken Zero. I had a bunch of those when I went out to my buddy's comedy show. Heineken Zero's it's a solid beer. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and a lot of
the only place I ever liked regular Heineken in the first place was sitting along the canals in Amsterdam, drinking it, and it's so it's nice to know that next time I go to Amsterdam, whenever that turns out to be, there will be a beer there for me too.
Absolutely. Well, listen, man, I tied you up for an hour and a half. I'm going to get you out of here. But I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Can you tell everybody again kind of where to find you and how to get the album whenever it comes out, when it comes out, and all that?
Yeah, well, I'm very surprised to hear that there's a song out already. I'll have to look into that, but I don't know that there'll be much I can do. If it's there, I guess go ahead and listen to it. But the album will be out on Valentine's Day, February 14th, on all the streaming platforms. It'll also be available on my website, leodisanto.com, where you can already pre-order it digitally. Some people are just into buying digital downloads from the artist because they know that whatever money you pay for it will go right to me and nobody else will take a cut. So if that's you, if you like doing things that way, feel free to go to leodisanto.com and pre-order it. The CDs and the vinyl will be available there too. There's going to be an album release at Tellus 360. I have a monthly residency there. I've been doing for probably like 8 years or so, every fourth Friday. So this will fall on Friday, February 28th. I'll have the CDs, hopefully the vinyl. I'll be playing with a trio of great musicians. And you can find me on social media. This is Leo Disanto is my handle on both Facebook and Instagram. And if you heard that chipmunk story I told earlier, for the love of God, make friends with me on social media. I need all the help I can get. It's not easy. It's not my Malo, you might say.
Oh man. Well, that's awesome, dude. I encourage everybody to go follow Leo, check out his music. I guarantee you're going to be pleasantly surprised, especially if you're in the, and I'm not going to really cage you here, but if you're in the folk or Americana kind of genre, if you're into that kind of music, you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't go check out Leo. But I mean, he really has music kind of through every genre, at least in one album or another. So go check something out.
Yeah, it's range. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you, being interested in talking to me on your show. And thanks for doing this show. It's a service to other solo musicians out there.
Absolutely, man. I love it. I love reaching people. So this is my favorite way to do it, is to get everybody's perspectives. So they could listen to me for forever, but I'm not. This is just one perspective. It's not that great. So.
Well, that's the thing about perspective. It needs to be. You need to shift it in order to see a fuller picture, right?
You got it, man. All right, everybody. I will see you on Thursday for the Thursday Thoughts episode, and have a great week.
Thank you for tuning in today. Your support keeps the music flowing. Every note and what I play means the world just to hear you know it. We'll see you next time. Don't stray by. Your love is our shining star.